Hello everyone and welcome back to the Artificial DM. So for today, we discovered a couple of stories about a dungeon master whose name is Dan. Dan had some problems running his games with power scaling, and we get to see a few experiences that his players went through before they finally stopped playing with him. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the story in RPG Horror Stories. This story is from Clean and Claire. Dan the DM and the 45-minute TPK. This is the tale of Dan, the Nightmare DM. I have so many stories about him, and all are painful. He was a nice enough guy, very self-important, and kind of annoying out of character, but I was friends with him, and he really wanted to DM. I was a relatively new player, still a cautious sort, and it was my first time experimenting with a magical class. We just had session 0 for his homebrew campaign. First sign of trouble was that he really wanted to homebrew his first one, and at the next session a few days later, the only players who could meet were me and my friend. We told Dan ahead of time, and he still wanted to play with just the two of us. So we sit down for a quick dungeon crawl. Immediately, I'm a bit overwhelmed by the fact that he clearly didn't nerf the dungeon for a half-sized party. We're a level 1 warlock and a level 1 bard, up against a Thakwa with 20 plus HP. We kill it, with difficulty, and head into the mines it came out of. Immediately, we're attacked by tiny goblins. At first it's kinda cool. There are 300 goblins the size of dolls, and we're wading through them decently. But there are a lot, and we've both burned through our spell slots and HP after the Thakwa and goblin horde. Finally, we clear the room, and decide to take a rest and recover spell slots. It turns out the dungeon was just 2 rooms. We finish our rest, go into the next room, and are faced with a treasure cache and a full-size cloud giant that springs an attack on us, skipping initiative because, according to Dan, it surprised us. It also had double attack. One hit takes me down to 2 HP, and the bard goes to less than 5. We both try to run, but even dashing, this cloud giant has more speed than my gnome, and reach enough to hit again. I'm dead. The cloud giant throws a rock and kills the bard in his next turn. TPK with the cloud giant in 2 turns of combat. 45 minutes of the session total. What gives? Well, you should have realized that the shrinking spell on the goblins would wear off. I don't know why you decided to rest. Because we were out of spell slots, and because we didn't expect to run into a flooping cloud giant in the next room as level 1 adventurers. What the floop, man? It's not my fault you didn't put 2 and 2 together. We didn't even have a shot of escaping though. We both didn't want to fight the giant because we knew there wasn't a chance of winning. Why wouldn't you just let us run? The cloud giant wouldn't have let you escape. It's not realistic. Sorry. We spent the next hour making new characters. Thanks a lot, Dan. It's completely Dan's fault. Dan totally should have let his players run away. I know that sometimes when you have a full-size party and the party starts trouble, yeah, killing a character is kind of fitting the narrative. But in this scenario, the cloud giant was way overpowered, he startled the duo, and they should have been able to run away. Maybe come at it next week when the full party is there. They were level 1 for Pete's sake. I know that OP is no longer playing with Dan, and I'm actually kind of curious what other stories that they've posted about Dan. So I ended up going to the Reddit page, and I did find Dan the DM and Too Many Second Chances, which is a follow-up story. So let's get into the tale. You may have seen my previous post about the TPK he ran in our very first session. After that, we ended up playing 2.5 more sessions with him because, well, sometimes you need some trial and error before you figure out how to DM. We gave him a lot of chances to improve, but it only got more ludicrous as time went on. I've separated this into 3 episodes within this post, in the interest of not karma hugging or subclugging. And just for clarity, episode 1 was the TPK story. Episode 2, Dan the DM has visions of Broadway. Dan's first session was an Adventurers League module, which I found out only just now. But he was determined to run his own homebrew campaign, and when we started as a full party, he made good on that promise. After the horrifying events of the first session, we were hopeful that from then on, Dan would be more careful with what he put forward. It turns out he absolutely was, but in all the wrong ways. The session started out interesting. Our party, Triton Paladin, Tabaxi Sorcerer, Tabaxi Rogue, me, and Halfling Ranger were all set to begin. We all were having a blast role-playing and saving a small town from a goblin clan. We all had slightly goofy characters. The Tabaxi were siblings who had been exiled from their clans for using magic. The Halfling Ranger was in search of his sister and had a longbow taller than himself. The Paladin had been raised among goblins and truly believed he was just an ugly blue goblin. It made for a really interesting approach to defeating the goblins, and despite the DM being a bit squirrely in terms of the goblins somehow knowing our plan at every turn, we were all feeling good about the potential for the campaign. With his dying breath, the Goblin King told us we had earned his respect, proving ourselves to be real heroes. Alright then. We got back to town and ran into a very significant seeming NPC. We were in a very straight fantasy world for humans, with halflings considered exotic, but there was a Kenku in the bar, who had a gun. We went up to him, knowing this had to be the main quest giver. Winged friend, know you the god of goblins? Yes, he was absolutely trying to convert a key NPC. The Tabaxi started talking about eating the birdie, and the halfling managed to get us all under control to ask him if he was the main quest benefactor. This was when insanity set in. The Kenku was fluent in common from spending enough time in the world. Yay! He started talking and Dan was roleplaying him with a very broken voice, so props for commitment, I guess. It was a little weird, because he was really into it. Like, really into it. We were in a public game room in a dorm, and he was declaiming loudly in a very halting, screechy parrot way. People were giving us dirty looks, but everyone is loud in the game room, so ultimately, we figured this would just be a funny story for some freshmen to share later. The Kenku began telling us about his master, who was murdered in his workshop, a brilliant inventor who took him in as a lost chick, raised him to be fierce, yada yada. It was a lot. It was very dramatic. He had been talking for a while. It was all about this edgy character named Jackdaw, his quest for vengeance, and how he needed our help. Okay, we were glad to help. The voice was a little much. It was very jarring the way his voice was switching tones and phrases the way Kenku voices are supposed to. But surely this was just to establish his character, and things would calm down soon. Besides, Dan was having fun, and we had all been role-playing and being silly throughout the session, so why not? But it just kept going, and going, and going. I didn't check my watch, but I swear it was more than 10 minutes of talking like a Kenku. There was so much about Jackdaw, his murdered master, all of this minute detail that, well, really didn't need to be exposited on. We gritted our teeth and took comfort in the fact that it would soon be over. It had to be, right? Then he stumbled. A word came out wrong, and he came to a screeching halt, fumbled with his notes and pulled out a full typed page. Sorry, hold on. I thought I had it down. You memorized this? That's a lot, Dan. Is that all for this one NPC? Dan shushed him and continued speed reading his front and back page of single-spaced paragraph-less monologue. Oh my gosh. Ooh. He cleared his throat, sat up, and set the page aside. How much more could there be? But Dan didn't pick up where he left off. Oh no. Dan started from the very, very beginning. That's right. He missed a word, and he started his monologue from the very top. Jackdaw is my name. Parrot voice, gestures, and all. We suffered through the monologue again. It was so much worse the second time through. Dan was a theater major. He wanted to be a voice actor. And yes, he could do a lot of voices. My least favorite was a vampire lord from session 3 who screeched, "Blood! Blood! I need blood!" with a high-pitched voice that gurgled like he'd just eaten 20 Starburst candies. When he finally finished his speech, Dan cleared his throat and told us in a normal voice that Jackdaw would connect us with a secret organization that could give us money and more heroic quests, and that soon he'd be in touch to tell us more about the murder of his master, who we presume was the BBEG. Then, Dan, without so much as a chance to let us discuss or respond, began packing up to go. Alright then, what a show, Dan. I would say encore, but no thanks. Still, we'd had fun with the actual quest. We liked our characters, and despite some clumsiness and a really overpowered, then drastically, suddenly dead, Goblin King, Dan had shown a pretty decent amount of improvement as far as mechanics, so with just a few side eyes, we agreed to meet again over the weekend for Session 3. Episode 3, Dan the DM and the suspiciously familiar NPC, in which Dan reveals why he desperately wanted to DM his homebrew for his first campaign. The weekend arrived, and we all sat down to play. Dan picked up from Session 2, letting us know that the Order of the Black Hand was ready to meet with us to give us a quest. Right on, sounds good, Dan. A hooded figure approached us in the bar and sat down. I am Dan Blackhand. His voice was very deep and serious, and we all got a little excited. Clearly this Heroes for Hire org was gray-zoned. A good sign, right? Dan pushes back his hood. This is the man you see before you. Dan pulled out a large illustration of a rogue ranger for us to see. The illustration was a detailed portrait of Dan, with tight leather pants, a face tattoo, a bow, and a cloak, right down to the same haircut, shaved on the sides with a Sokka-looking ponytail, stubble, and a mole in the exact same place on Dan's face. It was Dan, but buffer, edgier. And I can say all of this with complete confidence because I was the one who had drawn the picture 2 weeks before. To explain, I've always enjoyed drawing fantasy stuff, and I'm passable at it, so for the past few campaigns, I'd been our official character artist. I really enjoyed it, and tried my hardest to really fit the character to what the player wanted and described. Well, in the weeks before Dan started DMing, he had asked me to draw a new player character for him, but rather than describe it with words, he gave me a sketch he had done as a reference. Alright, cool Dan. I genuinely thought it was well done. It had a very strong resemblance to Dan, and I do know that some players really like their characters to resemble themselves because it's a bit of a connection. My first player character ever, way back when, was a super edgelord tiefling who was just a much hotter version of me with wings, so I get it. When I received the sketch, I asked Dan straight up if he wanted his new player character to look like him, and he said yes, then sent me his headshot for an even better reference. So yes, this NPC was a self-insert of Dan as a secret agent, Dan Blackhand. We were all a little stunned to say the least, but, well, at least he's invested, right? This would go on to be the last time that Dan would receive the benefit of the doubt on this matter, but what we didn't know yet was the worst yet to come, and this would be our last full session. Episode 4, Dan the DM and the Infinite Wave of Orcs. We decided to just pretend that Dan hadn't put himself into the campaign as a Gary Stu NPC. His edgy self-insert original character had made an appearance. His acting skills had been showcased. His ability to hook us into a plot? Well, it was still unclear, but we wanted to give him a chance. You can't improve if you don't have the chance to practice, right? So we accepted a quest to cleanse some temple in exchange for some cash and info on the ranger's missing sister, and headed into the wilderness. A few political things happened. We killed a vampire lord, and we angered some orcs who hated the temple and did not want it cleansed. We knew an assault was coming, so when we found the temple, we started fortifying it, ready for a crazy battle. Scrappy heroes against an army, that sort of thing. In preparation, my tabaxi set some traps and climbed a tree to snipe with a bow. Sorcerer began spreading oil for flame traps. Halfling Ranger hid in the top of the temple, ready to snipe as well. The Paladin had to leave early for a group project, but promised to be back next session after calling down a blessing for us from the Goblin God. Dan gave us a few minutes to prepare, then pulled up some music. We heard battle horns, then black speech. Yes, Dan seriously pulled up Saruman's Helm's Deep speech scene on YouTube for his orc army. Okay, cheesy, but that's fine. Again, this campaign was always a little hammy. 15 orcs came out, all receiving half cover from a cart and battering ram. It was a tough fight, but we'd quickly reached level 3 and our traps were doing their job. We knew there had to be more coming, since Dan let us prep for the battle. I stayed in my tree, and Sorcerer prepped a few more oil traps. The horns and black speech played again, and Dan gave us a big old grin. Okay Dan, you didn't fool any of us, but alright. We were low on HP by the time this battle ended. Despite being in a tree, Dan insisted that once I fired a shot, the orcs knew I was there, so I could receive no cover. Fair enough. Not the way I would have called it, but I wasn't going to fight the DM on a discretionary situation. If our normal DM were running the session, we would have climbed down at this point, thinking the battle was over, but we all knew Dan well enough to know there was probably another wave. Sure enough, This wave nearly wiped us out. I was below 5 HP, and there was still more than half of the wave left to kill. The sorcerer, who was the most veteran player in the group, quickly came up with a last-ditch plan. Despite the stress of the situation, it was kind of cool that Dan had actually given us a real situation to stress over. Good stakes, right? It actually seemed like a good sign. Sorcerer readied a scroll of wall of water he'd found, asking if he could have the wall hover above the orc wave. We then used his last spell slot to light himself on flooping fire and sprint into every single oil puddle and throw himself into the orc wave. Baller move. Of course, as soon as he set the battering ram and most of the orcs aflame, wall of water collapsed down onto him, putting him out. I climbed down, did a med check and stabilized him. Coolest bit of quick thinking I've ever seen. It really was a blast, and cool of Dan to say that the sorcerer could feasibly survive. We were thinking this had been a good session. Dan had done it. He'd figured out the balance, and we were feeling pretty good about giving him the benefit of the doubt earlier. Then... oh, Dan, no! On came the wave, and we took shelter inside the temple. No spell slots left, no more potions, the sorcerer with no big battle spells left. It was just me and the ranger shooting down on the wave in a slow, horrible, dull war of attrition. Luckily, the flames in the puddles were still going, keeping the orcs back from the door. We finally killed the orcs. Surely, now we were done. Nope. Hell to the no. We started to talk about running away. Dan chuckled. It was so self-satisfied, I wanted to hurl something at his head. If those fires go out, we're screwed. Down below you, there is a crash. The orcs have broken through your barricaded doors. You can hear footsteps on the stairs. Okay, do we have any kind of magic to escape? Maybe if we can get on the roof, we can climb down? As you despair in the tower, you hear a loud war cry. My tabaxi pierced through the window to see, but not enough to invite attack. Down below, you see two heroic figures dash into the battlefield. Moving swiftly, they cut through the enemy orcs. They run to the tower, and you hear the sound of orcs crying out in fear. Then, all is still. You hear footsteps on the stairs again, and two figures step into the room, spattered with blood. All of us knew what was coming. Yes, it was Dan in Blackhand and Jackdaw, single-handedly stepping in to save the day. And that was the last real session we played with Dan. With his Gary Stews racing in to save the poor, helpless player characters, he revealed that his problems weren't just from being a new DM, but from missing the point entirely. He started another, blissfully much shorter, monologue. We suffered through it. Then, the paler, damn, flooping warhorns. Another wave. I actually stood up, pointed out that it was almost time to go, and that I would rather not slog through another round of fighting. Dan agreed, and told us to be back for the next session in a few days. I begged off, but our poor paladin. No one told him, and I found out later that he and the ranger showed up for the session, only to be confronted with 4 more waves of orcs. Oh my gosh, Then, after slogging through that, they were presented with the discovery that the ranger's sister, his character's entire motivation, had been burned to death years before and was of no importance to the quest at all. Alright then, Dan. From what I know, that was the last straw. Dan kept trying to get us together for another session, but we all begged off. Until, finally, thankfully, he graduated a few months later, and we could get back to our usual DM's campaign. I don't think I was ever so grateful to play official WotC content before. I totally understand wanting to play your own homebrew world, your own homebrew content, and filling your players with a unique wonder about the game. Personally, I have found it is best to run a couple of campaigns with official content, either one shot or a normal campaign, just to get a feel of the game. It felt like Dan had a lot of interesting ideas, it's just he wasn't able to read the table and understand that he was overpowered. Not that he was overpowered, but what he was presenting was overpowered. At the same time, he himself was viewing his position as a role that needed to be filled, which is why he had his 2 DMPCs. It will never make sense to me why a DM feels like he needs to make a DMPC, especially being as how much of the world he has an interaction with, and how many different characters he already gets to voice and act out and give life to. It is a little bit of a shame that the players didn't actually sit him down and go, hey man, we like what you've got going, but you've got to tone things down a little bit. Because I bet that Dan left school just thinking that everybody got too busy, when in reality, he could have just adjusted some of the game to make the game more enjoyable. Communication is key to making sure that everybody around the table is having a good time. If you don't have that communication, then the people who are making it not enjoyable for everyone else will not know that they are making it not enjoyable. But that's at least what I think. Be sure to let me know down in the comments below your thoughts and opinions. If you enjoyed the story, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel out, and it lets YouTube know that people are enjoying the content. That's going to do it for today. And until next time, hope you feel inspired.